Hello, and thanks for mathing with me today. In this video, we will be adding and subtracting fractions and mixed numbers. We'll start by adding fractions that have the same or like denominators. To add or subtract fractions with like denominators, all we need to do is add their numerators to determine the numerator of our answer, and then we write that numerator over the denominator that the two fractions already share. For example, in number 1, we have the fraction 5/12 plus 7/12. So to add these fractions, we're going to add their numerators first. 5 plus 7 is 12, and that's the numerator of our sum. And then our denominator is the denominator that both fractions already share, 12. So our answer is 12 over 12, and hopefully you recognize that that can simplify to 1. So whenever we can, we want to simplify our fraction. Let's do another one together. In number 2, we have 3 halves minus 5 halves. The first step is to subtract our numerators. So 3 minus 5 gives us a negative 2. And then again, we write it over the denominator that the fractions already share. And we see also that this fraction simplifies to negative 1. Pause the video and try number 3 on your own. Hopefully you paused the video and you saw that negative 4 plus 5 gives us a positive 1, and then we write it over the denominator 7 that the fractions both share. So negative 4/7 plus 5/7 is positive 1/7. That was the easy part. Now we're going to add and subtract fractions that don't have the same denominator, called unlike denominators. In order to add these fractions that have unlike denominators, we need to find a common denominator. We can find a common denominator by multiplying each fraction, both top and bottom, by the denominator of the other fraction. However, this method often leads to large fractions that in the end need to be simplified. So the best method is to find the least common denominator. The least common denominator, or LCD, is the smallest number that both denominators can multiply into. We multiply each fraction by the value that would make the denominator the least common denominator. This method is the best and most efficient because not only will we not have to add and subtract larger values, but we will also not have to simplify as often or as much in the final answer. Let's try some examples. So remember, we have to make sure the denominators, the bottom of the fraction, are the same. If they're not, we need to find the least common denominator. And then we add or subtract the numerators and put that answer over our least common denominator. And then ultimately, if we need to, we will simplify. So in number 4, we have 3/4 plus 7/6. The first step is going to be to find that least common denominator, which it turns out is the least common multiple of both denominators. So we're going to start by listing the multiples of the denominators. Let's start with the multiples of 4. So we clearly have 4, and then 4 times 2 is 8, and 4 times 3 is 12, and 4 times 4 is 16. So we just want to count by 4s. 20, 24. Let's see if that gets us far enough. Let's list the multiples of 6. So 6, 12, and I already see our least common multiple. Both have a multiple of 12, and it is the least multiple that they have in common. Therefore, 12 is our least common denominator. Now, to make our denominator 12 in the first fraction, what would we need to multiply 4 by? We need to multiply it by 3, right? Because 3 times 4 is 12. If we multiply the denominator by 3, then we have to multiply the numerator by 3 as well in order to maintain the same fraction. We also want to look at how do we get 6 to equal 12? We multiply it by 2. If we multiply the denominator by 2, then we also need to multiply the numerator by 2. So let's go ahead and rewrite these fractions with a denominator of 12. So 3 times 3 is 9, and 3 times 4 is 12. So that's our fraction 3/4 written with a denominator of 12. And then 7 times 2 is 14 in our second fraction, and 6 times 2 is 12. Now both of our fractions have a denominator of 12, and we can simply add the numerators. 9 plus 14 is going to give us 23, and then our denominator stays as 12. So 3/4 plus 7/6 equals 23/12. And since this fraction is already simplified, that is our final answer. Let's try number 5. We have the fraction 4/5 and we're subtracting 2/3. Let's start by listing the multiples of 5, 5, 10, 15, 20. Let's see how we do when we list the multiples of 3, see if we have to go further. We're counting by threes, 3, 6, 9, 12, 15. There we go. I see that we have the least common multiple of 15 in both of our denominators. Now we need to determine how do we get the denominator 5 to equal 15. What do? We multiply by 3, which means we need to multiply that numerator by 3 as well. How do we get 3 equal to 15? We multiply by 5, which means we need to multiply the numerator by 5 as well. Now let's rewrite our fractions. 3 times 4 is 12 in our first fraction. Over 3 times 5 is 15. And we're subtracting from that. 2 times 5 is 10. Over 3 times 5 is 15. So 12 minus 10 is going to give us 2 over our same denominator of 15. This shows that 4/5 minus 2/3 is 2/15. Pause the video and try examples 6 and 7 on your own. Hopefully you paused the video and you found that number 6 is equal to negative 13 over 35, and number 7 is equal to 7/4. In the last examples, we're going to add and subtract mixed numbers. So just like when we were multiplying and dividing, the first step is to convert the mixed number to an improper fraction. Then we're going to find a common denominator just like we did in the previous examples. And then lastly, add or subtract and simplify if possible. In number 8, we have 2 and 3/4, and we're going to rewrite that by multiplying 4 times 2 to get 8 and adding 3 to get 11/4. And we're going to add that to 3 times 2, which is 6, plus 1, which is 7. So we're going to add that to 7/2. And then we want to find a least common denominator. And you may have already noticed that our denominator of 2, if we just multiply this by 2, it will give us a denominator of 4, which will allow us to have the same denominator. So if I multiply the denominator by 2, I must multiply the numerator by 2 in order to maintain the same fraction. So we have 11/4 plus 7 times 2 is 14 over 4. We add 11 plus 14 to get 25, and our denominator stays the same. So 2 and 3/4 plus 3 and 1/2 equals 25/4. Let's do one more together. 1 3/4 minus 2 and 5/6. Let's first rewrite the mixed number as a fraction. 4 times 1 is 4 plus 3 is 7/4 minus 6 times 2 is 12 plus 5 is 17/6. Next, we're going to find our least common multiple so that we can find our LCD. So the multiples of 4 are 4, 8, 12. That I already know is going to be a multiple of 6, but let's just write them out, right? Our multiples of 6 are 6 and 12. So there is our least common multiple, 12. So our denominator, our least common denominator, is going to be 12. How do I get 12? How do I turn 4 into 12? I multiply by 3. So I'm going to multiply that numerator by 3 as well. And 6 times 2 is 12, so I'm going to multiply this numerator by 2. Let's rewrite our fractions with our denominators of 12. 7 times 3 is 21, over 3 times 4 is 12, minus 17 times 2, which is going to be 34, over our 6 times 2, which is 12. 21 minus 34 then is going to be a negative 13 over 12. Now it's your turn to try. Find a common denominator, then add or subtract the fractions. Pause the video now and try numbers 10 and 11 on your own. Hopefully you paused the video and you found that 3 and 5/8 plus 1 and 3/4 equals 43/8, and negative 5 and 1/7 minus 4 and 1/5 equals the ridiculous number of negative 327 over 35. I hope today in this video that you learned how to add and subtract mixed numbers as well as fractions by finding common denominators. Thank you so much for mathing with me today.